Senator Stivers, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and talk with me. We have had some time to digest a lot of the things that have come out of the session and start setting our sights on what may happen in 2025 here during the interim. In our last interview, you said the General Assembly's job is to set the policy agenda and the executive branch's job is to execute. Now, that said, the governor said that he felt the budget process was a lot more collaborative this time around. How collaborative was it from your perspective?
I don't know if it's as collaborative as he thinks it was. We asked questions probably, and we had a little bit more dialogue, but still we feel this is our realm to set policy per the Constitution. And as I said, they execute on that. We ask for information, we ask for details. You have to know what trends are. What if you put a number into a system, what will it generate? But it was more collaborative, but I don't think it was as collaborative as I have seen it be with a lot of other governors.
I wanted to talk, at least going into one of those issues, being the education funding that we hear often talked about from the executive branch and was a big point of discussion throughout the session. The amount of education funding that increased from the first draft that came from the House to the last draft in the budget, and we're starting to see the effect now in local school districts. We're also seeing a wide range of increases in teacher pay. You got some districts that are doing 1% to 2%, and then we have some that are on the high end of 8 to 10%. We've had a lot that, if you had to kind of create a bell curve of sorts, landing in the 4 to 5%. Is that enough to make a difference in the teacher shortage that we're hearing so much about that some would argue is contributing to lower student performance in the classroom?
I'm going to quote, I think the head of the KEA, who said a 5% increase is a pretty significant increase. So this is a teacher saying this is significant from a teacher's standpoint. So we knew that where we thought we would hit, and I made the statement that with what we were doing with the 3% increase and a 6% increase in the SEEK allotment, plus all the additional money we were putting in the transportation, that we would see somewhere around a 5% increase this year, and then even maybe a greater increase next year. So it's hitting just about what we are doing, and it is all done within the SEEK formula, so you don't get any type of disproportionate outliers that would create inequitable funding for one system over another.
Is there more outside of the realm of teacher raises that you think can be done to impact student performance in the classroom? We've heard a lot of talk about discipline issues, for example.
There is, I think, and this gets into student performance, but it also gets into teacher satisfaction, creating better environments for the student to learn in and the teacher to teach in, and how we do that. And part of that was through some of the juvenile justice bills to try to deal with issues like that. There are, we're looking at health care, daycare, opioid abuse. All these things tend to disrupt a child and can have a lot of disruption in the classroom.
Staying on education, you voted for House Bill 2 this year to let voters decide the future of how schools are funded in the state, which is already setting up a big debate between now and November. One part of that debate is the rural and urban divide of available opportunities for alternatives to traditional public school. So being from a rural district yourself, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that particular part of this debate.
Well, I think there's some misnomers about what this means. That if this constitutional amendment passes, it means there's going to be monies funneled away from public education, that it's a mandate. No, it's not that. It is to look at alternatives, and alternatives primarily would be in areas where there are failing schools. And if you go back and look at what we've done in the past, it's been primarily focused on dealing with the Jefferson County public school system. And now you're seeing entities like the Urban League, NAACP, others criticize for those student populations that have been left behind. If this passes, this would be something that could be done in conjunction with public education, not in opposition to. And you could go into those distressed areas and do something that would be different to help raise the trajectory of these students and these cultures that have been left behind.
Would you like to see more of that in Clay County?
The need for it as it is there, I don't think we have that type of need, and that's where I think you're seeing a major difference between the rural areas and the urban areas, because you're seeing a greater demand and want for alternative in the urban areas than you are in the rural areas.
So switching over to childcare, federal money expiring soon for childcare, and it was stated a lot during the session that there's a great shortage in the state, and we heard a lot about Senator Carroll's Horizons Act this year, the universal pre-K proposal being pushed by the governor. They're expensive, and that can be unpopular. Neither proposal ended up really going far this session. So what can be done by lawmakers moving forward, not just for families that may have a barrier to the workforce, as some see with this particular issue, but also for the providers who may have tough choices ahead, whether it be letting some folks go or having to shut down?
Well, I think it's going to have to be almost a community by community type of resolution. Clark County, their school board got together and they took one of their older buildings and repurposed it, and are working, as I understand, with their school board, their teachers there, to develop daycare, but also working with the public and other business entities to talk about how they can help in those realms. So we're looking in Clay County and Manchester and other areas about how we can maybe repurpose some buildings, do collaboratives with the bank, the school system, the hospital, the Federal Corrections Institute, to do a continuum that would satisfy everybody. And this is what I think was flawed about the preschool universal pre-K, was because that's a school year, school-based type of resolution. It doesn't take care of the second shifter or the weekend person who has that shift where there isn't daycare. And so you need to look at it from a 24-hour perspective and a 7-day-a-week perspective.
Over in the other chamber, the House Speaker said late last month that the long-planned state income tax elimination may tap the brakes around 3%. What are some of the thoughts that are occurring in your chamber about this particular plan and what the right direction is to go on?
Oh, we're all, from the Speaker and myself, we're both in agreement that being competitive in this day and age and trying to attract businesses and industries here, we have to have a competitive tax code. So how we get to that, and we're working very hard collaboratively with the House on this, but it will take time. We've hit the first couple of triggers very fast. It may take a year or two for us to kind of control some other things, but it's a mechanism of costs as compared to receipts. And so we think there might be some areas where we can do some different things. And we are doing those by, once we get our pension contributions a little bit more under control, then that would be an area where that would help us hit the next trigger. There are some other areas, maybe going back to something like a zero-based budgeting to make people justify why a program has been in existence for 20 years. We start new programs, but do we sunset old programs? And then looking at our tax code overall, how do we want to work through consumption taxes versus production taxes?
Is it too soon to ask if we might see any legislation next year that may affect our state tax code, whether it be income taxes or others?
I don't think that it would be next year because we're in a 2-year budget cycle. I think you would generally want to see it as you develop the next 2-year plan, so your revenues and expenditures kind of meet based on what you're doing. So it gives us a year and a half to look at it.
You hosted Louisville Mayor Craig Greenberg in your district last week for a big policy discussion, and I've also heard a lot of talk about how Louisville did very well in the budget this year. So I'm curious, what's been different about the relationship between the city and the state government now, and is there an example here to follow?
Yeah, if you think about the state of Kentucky as a business, it has 120 units. Each county is a unit. Jefferson County generates about 18 to 19% of all the revenues in the state. So you need to kind of take a little bit of a note, and you have to be responsive to those needs. Because if you ask a business person that says, hey, look, 20% of my revenues are of my business are generated from this product line, you have to look at that and you have to be responsive to it. So Mayor Greenberg came in. Some friends of mine in Louisville, actually Republicans, said, "Hey, we want to put you together and set up some meetings to talk with the mayor and have a better relationship than the prior mayor, because the prior mayor rarely reached out to us, and Mayor Greenberg did consistently." And we knew there was going to be differences, but he was very, very willing to say, "Hey, yeah, on the differences, we'll be different, but there's a lot of other areas we can find common ground, and we'll work towards those."
We're seeing the effects from that.
Yeah.
This year's task force appointments were announced a short time ago, and we're hoping to look into quite a bit: workforce attraction and retention, housing, artificial intelligence. What do you hope to gain from these committees so far, and is there an early leader to you on the big issue that we'll be hearing a lot in the interim?
Yeah, it's hard to tell, and we're in June. So by what happens in January and February of next year, a lot can change. But you hear discussions on AI constantly, and people are thinking, well, what does that have to do with everything from what you watch on TV to radio broadcasts, infringement on individual rights, and it caused a strike in the Writers Guild. So it's all part of that, but to me there's a lot more to it, because if you go beyond the actual function of artificial intelligence, it has a big impact on the energy world, because it consumes huge amounts of energy, and we don't have a lot of capacity for much more demand. So that's kind of what I think the group will look at. You get to housing. We know that housing is a big component of a lot of the urban area problems, and we put a lot of money into those, back to Mayor Greenberg, but also working with Amanda Bledsoe and Luther Deaton at the bank in Lexington. We worked with them on the Transylvania project. We know that if you look at the criminal justice system, I'm one that believes that the criminal justice system needs tweaks, but it's not broken. What you see there is a manifestation of underlying problems. Some of those underlying problems are lack of housing. So, those are the issues like that we'll work on. I'm trying to think what the third one you said.
Workforce attraction.
Oh, workforce, yeah. Remote workers, we're needing in the Bowling Green area, I think 6,000 or more unfilled jobs, talent attraction. And these aren't just general labor jobs. They're engineering jobs, they're skilled labor jobs. How we attract people into the area that can fill those, but also how we can keep people in the area that can fill those, and how we can train people in the area to fill those jobs. And which kind of gets into the whole realm of computers and technology, the remote worker. A lot of people who are, and I've got children that are working in New York, but they live in Kentucky. So that plays into it, how we train and attract, and what type of infrastructure dynamics we need to have a good workforce.
And generally, do you expect legislation to come out of these task forces going into the following year, or sometimes does it take a little bit more time?
It could be legislation that we could do some things. Maybe we want to look at the universities, maybe K through 12, maybe KCTCS. When you start talking about workforce, you want to do that. It may be something we want to consider in a budgetary type of cycle, to say, hey, well, we know one of the problems is we need additional infrastructure, therefore we're going to need funds when we go into the 2026 session and budget. So it could be a combination of one or the other, or both. But it all depends. Several of the task force, they can't come to some conclusions. Some we have come with some really good conclusions and been able to implement those conclusions in the next session. But it just depends on how things are flowing.
So we've breezed through just about all my questions, so here we're at the last one. And I'm curious, I want to hear what you feel about this, not necessarily, how the party or the caucus might feel. What are you most happy with coming out of this session, and what do you want to see get done next year? Not necessarily what you think the biggest issue is going to be, but what is going to be your highest priority for the next session?
Well, you've asked me two questions there. One, what am I most happy to see, and what are my priorities? We were able to do some really good investing, teacher pay and public education. And that's where I go back to your question about the constitutional amendment. This doesn't have to be in competition with charter schools or changing the Constitution about common schools and how we fund schools. It could be in conjunction with, and we firmly believe that, and I think we made a good statement because what you're seeing this year was based on a 3% allotment, which next year will go up to 6% increase, plus additional money being put into transportation. The dollars we put into research, the universities, infrastructure, water, sewer, roads, $500 million more in roads. Those are the types of things that will grow our economy, that will make us competitive with our sister states. But the biggest thing out of that, and I feel very good about that, how we were very focused, collaborative in what we did with the House, worked well with the House, but we controlled our spending, and with all the dollars we're putting in the system, we did it while cutting your taxes. So that individual who is working every day is going to see less money taken out of their paycheck. Even that teacher who's going to get that 5 or 10% raise, they're going to see that raise, but we're going to take less of it back. So that's even like getting another raise on top of that. So I think that type of budgeting and being fiscally responsible, very proud of that. I think that's very significant that you can see how you can be fiscally responsible, cut taxes, but still increase spending in the areas you need to. The other thing that I think, looking towards this next session, you hit a lot of them in asking me about the task force. We want to know how AI is going to impact us. We have to work to make a better and more adaptable, qualified workforce. We have to be responsible in our spending, so we're going to watch the budget and the implementation and how these dollars get out the door. And that's where I think as we watch, when all of this kicks in July at the new fiscal year, it will then give us a framework for what we want to do in 25. One that I'm going to look at personally is going to go back to the potential research at the universities, Senate Bill 1, and what we can do further to effectuate Senate Bill 1.
All right. Senator Stivers, I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Well, appreciate y'all coming here and doing the interview. Always fun to do these types of interviews. Thank you.